All right. We don't have a lot of time, but the whole idea is not for me to ask questions, but I think we have a very interested and you know, an audience that's, I think, pretty much into asking a lot of questions. So I'll just ask you to direct, taking from what they've been talking about, to direct any questions to any of the panelists who are here for a few minutes before we break for tea. Go ahead. Yes, Hilmi?
Yeah. Question perhaps for Ravi. You mentioned when you said that corporates have to embed sustainability in corporate strategy. Is there a particular trigger that motivates them to do that? That's part one. And then the other area of the perspective as well, how do you measure the return that you get out of the back? And perhaps great expense, do you apply any of those? Assuming it does come up in some of the criteria. How do you apply that in your organization? Thanks.
Excellent. I think this is a question I would love to answer to get that sensitivity. Number one, in terms of mobilizing strategic corporate sustainability, when we work with corporates, the first thing we look for is a leader, the chairman, the CEO, at the top end, who are totally understanding the subject and committed. If we don't find that, we don't even start working with those companies. Because the first criteria we look at is having got leaders at the top who understand why they need to embed sustainability in the business. Second criteria we look at is in embedding sustainability. I already mentioned that embedding sustainability must be before we differentiate our sustainability. What has happened is most companies differentiate our sustainability and start talking about all the good stuff they do long before they have embedded sustainability. So what do I mean by embedding sustainability? Number one, the company's carbon footprint and its suppliers' carbon footprint. We need to first attack that. And we need to look at their energy source today. How do we get closer to a journey of renewable energy? Number two, water footprint. What amount of water are they using today? And we help them to progress towards water sustainability, waste management. And once we get these things sorted out, then only we start looking at embedding that in the business and then moving towards the second stage of now, having done that embedding, can we now create a brand that can be differentiating the company? And just to add to the design concept, we have a criteria there which is sustainability-led design. So what we try to do is we bring excellent designers to help design the end products or the services that they are trying to curate, but ensure that every element from the supply chain to the sourcing, to the manufacturing processes, to the packaging is all looking at the issue of sustainability. So I would say when we look for embedding sustainability, we look for leadership and we look for logical criteria. It's only after that we then create programs. And right now in Sri Lanka, there are 3 companies we are working in creating the second phase, because they have all bought into the first phase, and it's amazing. I mean, Yasangi's company, Aitken Spence is one we are probably going to be, in the next 1 year, we will be able to claim that we are probably one of the most sustainable plantation companies on the planet, because we have got our energy sorted out, we are very much going towards renewable energy. We have started looking at rainwater harvesting and water management. Because Sri Lanka is facing probably one of the most amazing crises that somehow people tend to not even talk about. And that is massive drought already hitting 24 out of the 25 5 or 26 districts. So we already have a huge issue.
All right, Yasangi, would you like to add to that? Yes.
Of course, majority of what I wanted to mention has been commented by Dr. Fernando as well. What I would like to add at this point is when we started off in formalizing a sustainability strategy for Aitken Spence, Dr. Ravi Fernando was actually one of the key influencers that we had the fortune of working with through our engagement in the UN Global Compact. So that is one of the reasons why we had an integrated sustainability policy, because Aitken Spence is a diversified conglomerate. So we don't have one-size-fits-all solutions, as I was saying, and we needed to come up with strategies that we can apply across the board to all subsidiaries, where we can mandate certain action, for example, having an environmental management system and things like that. But we work one-on-one with subsidiaries to embed the sustainability ideologies. For example, like what Dr. Fernando was mentioning about Alpitia Plantations, which is an associate company. They are redesigning their sustainability strategy, moving away from the mandated action to come up with a strategy that works in line with their core requirements. That has happened to some extent with the other subsidiaries as well. So to answer your question, do we embrace those strategies? Yes, we do. Are we perfect? Not at all. We are still on that journey to achieve that. We've made some good decisions that worked for us. There is still a lot more that we can do in embedding the strategies as well, but we believe that we are on the right track to doing so. Even with the subsidiaries like our hotel sector, which are more mature and more advanced in embedding sustainability, even then we still have a lot more to do. But it's an ongoing journey, and it is something that we are working on as well, to focus on the KPIs that we talked about. It's mandatory that any company has KPIs that they monitor, because there's no point in having a sustainability strategy that you can't measure. Your achievements can only be credible if you actually measure it. For example, our direct energy consumption, just over 20% of our direct energy consumption is sourced from renewable sources. And that's just one example of the metrics that we maintain. But that is only the direct energy consumption. When we combine it with indirect energy consumption, it's a little less than that. So like that, there are certain things that we apply across the board, but when we come to the subsidiaries or the companies individually, embedding takes a little bit more time. Starts at the top. It has to start from the top, because without top-level support, nothing will work. But yes, we do embrace those strategies, and we do have metrics for all companies as well.
Thank you, Yasangi. Yes, Kitsiri.
Yeah, and listening to all the speakers this morning, I found one thing missing. And right now, Ravi had given the lead to design and said how to incorporate sustainability in design. In fact, the missing link which I want to ask you about is, why didn't you talk about it, the circular economy, by another Amanda, not you. Circular economy is a fantastic concept, which actually we should lead our industries into it. And the way to lead it into circular economy is through design. Because you have to build the circular economy concepts into the design of any product or even a service. So then you can get rid of the current linear economy where we consume and throw away. Instead, we will put it back into natural circular circulation of the resources. So I would like to have some ideas from any of the panel members about that.
Thank you, Kitsiri, for bringing that up. Kitsiri worked as a part of our company and good old friend. Lee?
Yeah, so I don't know whether you've read Cradle to Cradle at all. Obviously, some nods around the place. And interestingly, this word sustainable, so Michael Braungart, who wrote the book, has a bit in it. He says, if you were to ask someone, how's your marriage? And the person replied, sustainable, you know, it's basically not going that well, let's face it. So really, we need to get beyond sustainable, and maybe that's where the word good is coming in. It's kind of what I mean by good design. And you're right, of course, but that notion of circular works for some things, but there's a lot of stuff which, you know, particularly in the FMCG space, and if we just look at like plastics and things, you know, I mentioned the shampoo bottles and stuff, you could bring and refill shampoo in a supermarket. And if someone asks me to design shampoo bottles, that's probably the first thing I'll say is redesign how you package your product. Do you need it in a plastic thing, or is it nicer to do it somewhere else, some other way? And the answer is usually, but we can't afford to do that, and the supermarkets won't let us, blah, 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 and so on. So this is where that top-down thing really works, to have vision with these things. Or you just say, okay, we can have disposable items, but as a country, they're not allowed to persist for more than 3 months, full stop. That's a law. Now go and solve the problem for me, clever sciencey sort of people, because at the end of the day, it's a little bit unfair to ask consumers to do the hard work of recycling if you're basically not giving us another option other than to use some polymers that last on a beach for 500 years or whatever it is. So there's a lot to that circular economy notion, and some things simply are just very short lifespan throwaway type things, which we're all guilty. No matter how hard you try to bring a bag to the supermarket, for sure you'll end up with a carrier bag at some point in time. It's impossible not to. But why is it my fault that that persists on Earth, really, as a consumer? I just want to take my stuff home in a convenient manner. So we can solve those kind of problems, I think, by being a bit more intelligent with how we design those things. At the end of the day, we take oil, a black, gloopy, horrible thing, and we turn it into a bright white polymer bag somehow. That's kind of magic. Can we not be more clever with how long that lasts on Earth and solve the problem for the consumer without asking them to do the hard work?
Thank you. May I take any other question? Yes, Shahara.
Just a suggestion that if you're really looking at the future of brands, I told this maybe to Amanda and isn't it important that we look beyond the carbon credits and things like that to a far larger paradigm shift where you're really looking at social equity as more, rather than profit as more the transaction and the where policy is based on in terms of units of production is all about profits and money. But look at social impacts where we should someone develops the proper matrix. Coming back to the first question, which is how we could really define value creation. So, human beings and labor is no longer an input, it's an output, and so on.
Yeah, Shahara, I'm totally with you on this. And the kind of brands that we are now developing, the branding we are developing, the projects that we are branding the company through this, and I can't reveal, but there is a hotel company we are working with, which will be launching a branding strategy in May. LPT is going to do the same, and there's one other company maybe you should remember, but we are also doing this in China and Vietnam.
So 100% agreed. I don't think that. But the thing is, for these things to happen, you first need leaders who understand this is not about short-term profits. 99% of the time, the problem is that you have short-termism. And I would say the enemy of sustainability is short-termism. And the reward system that rewards short-termism. So the moment we can start beginning to help people understand that short-termism is what is causing these problems, then you have a huge issue. I mean, I've been reading, it was great to see Rohantha present about the tourism side. But we work with a company in the sustainable tourism space globally, in Vietnam. And I can tell you, sustainable tourism is absolutely the right way for Sri Lanka to go. There isn't even a doubt in my mind about it. Because today, the WTO figure is 1.85 billion tourists projected by 2030. Today, we have 1.25 billion tourists in the world. Of that, the projection is by 2030, there will be 230 million sustainable tourists. So what is a sustainable tourist? These are guys who spend between 10 to 12 days in a destination, who spend between $150 to $250 per night, and who are absolutely concerned about their carbon footprint from the time they come into the country, offsetting that, and how they operate in the market. Now, should we be looking at 5 million more tourists, or should we be saying let's attract 1% of that sustainable tourism side will be a hellishly lot more profitable? Costa Rica, Nepal, Bhutan are absolutely driving this sector and becoming extremely profitable. So I think Sri Lanka, time has come to go for sustainable tourism and not just try to get another 5 million people here.
Can I muscle in?
Yes.
Just, sorry, Amanda, I think you've got something to say, but I would say that one of the frustrating things that I've noticed while looking into these things for many years now is that sustainability, there it is again, is a lot of the time a privilege that for people with money. So here I am with my nice camper shoes, my organic, privately educated trousers, all of these things, but these are expensive things. So, and you know what you're talking about, it's a luxury to be a sustainable tourist. A sustainable tourist would stay at home and do a virtual reality trip to Sri Lanka and not get on an aeroplane. Because let's face it, as soon as you've done that, you may as well like go home, because again, you're not really being sustainable unless you come in a rowing boat or something. So, you know, like we have to be careful with how we measure these things. And also, like, why is it the domain of the privileged rich people to have organic things and everything? You know, there's so many contradictions in that space. In Kiehl's now, the huge organic section is all individually wrapped in plastic. And again, you're like, come on. And I saw this in Tesco's in the UK. You had the organic tomatoes were in compostable packaging, fine, but the non-organic ones are not. But why? If the packaging is there that's compostable, why are they not all in it? So I think really we need to facilitate and again, not put the onus on the consumer. We just need to make it affordable and easy to be good, and then everyone can just carry on and do it.
I wanted to just add something to that. We just banned plastic bags in Mumbai from April 1. And we thought we would solve all the problems. Except my wife said, what do we do with the garbage bin bag? So I went to Amazon and I found, environmentally friendly bags. But unfortunately, they cost 3 times my current plastic bag. So we were still battling with the problem of how to manage the garbage. We could manage everything else from shopping to everything. And then I discovered a video who took a newspaper and folded it in such a way that it became a paper bag that could go into the garbage bin. So here is the opportunity for innovation. And somebody asked a question on Facebook and said, what do I do with my wet garbage? And he said, use the Sunday papers, because the paper is... So, you know, because Sunday papers always, the paper is, has a little laminate.
Yeah. Thanks, Prabs. Amanda, anything?
Yeah, I actually, it's kind of in response to what Lee said and also what you were saying about social inclusion. It's one of the reasons I think it's really helpful to have an ecosystem view of what we're trying to shift to, right? So the one thing that we have to focus on is how we get the big corporates to also change their practices. But there's also all of these new businesses that are coming up that have this at their core. So social inclusion is built into how they operate. That's part of their core values and how they started, right? And the same thing comes when you're talking about like the prices and having it be kind of a luxury or elite product. One of the things we've seen over the last 5 years is, when Good Market first started, the initial organic brands were really expensive. They were focusing on, the supply was limited, demand was huge, and they were focused on, value-added products, everything sorted and graded and nicely branded and, nice marketing, all of that. Now we have all these new enterprises that have popped up, organic farmers from remote areas who said, our mission is to make organic affordable, right? And their marketing isn't as nice, the signage isn't as nice, but they're filling a different gap in the ecosystem. So when we look at it like that, where we challenge every enterprise to do the best that it can, but we also know that one enterprise isn't going to solve all the problems at once. It's all of us working together on our little piece.
If I may add a little bit on the social context that you brought up in your question, let me just share an example from our hotels. We have a local purchasing policy which requires all hotels to source their produce from farmers within 35 to 40 kilometer radius. That reduces the transportation thereby reducing the emissions, and it also gives economic returns to the local farmers. Not stopping there, the hotels also work on developing the quality of the produce that they get from the local farmers as well, so that we don't have an excuse to say, look, your produce doesn't meet the expected quality standards. We work on building the quality standards of the local farmers so that they can actually produce more. So there are similar practices that happen within a lot of the sectors where social inclusion can happen by means of making them part of the supply chain as well. I don't know to what extent every industry can do that, but having policies that gives priority to local communities can actually include them in the bigger corporates contributing to economic development as well.
Thank you. We are a little over time, but let me ask you to direct any questions to some of the other panelists.
I have one
yes?
question which is to everybody, and that is, to what extent can legislation help? Because I was thinking of my plastic bag example.
Yeah.
Once I ban it, people find ways to make up for their past, whatever they were doing in the past. But if there's no legislation, then we are all struggling on our own as individuals and as companies to do something about it.
Can I comment on that? I mean, legislation will only help if it's actually implemented and it is, followed through. And I think that is something I wanted to say as well, like taking on from all of this, while the ecosystem is building, while individual companies have to understand that if we want to give an affordable product, we need to scale up, we need to segment our products, there needs to be several products that are going to different markets. One market can subsidize another market, etc. But there has to be an enabling environment in terms of it can be tax relief, it can be subsidies, it can be this recognition. It can simply be recognition, like Sri Lanka tourism, for instance. We are talking about absolutely sustainability is the only niche we can go into. There's no other way Sri Lanka tourism can flourish. And unfortunately that's the role of the government, but if they were to recognize and brand our country with that recognition as sustainable, and then create the space for companies like myself, smaller companies that are part of the good market, bigger companies who can then assist smaller companies who are coming up, then that is how we create that demand for Sri Lanka, and that is the way to actually scale up and make sustainability affordable for all. That's what I feel. But legislation is important, but it has to be followed on, because we banned plastic bags too, and there's really nothing happening about that.
Can I just give two examples really, really quickly? I'll just say them. CFCs in fridges and lead in cars. Both were banned. It wasn't public pressure or anything. It was just, these are going to kill us. Stop them. The car manufacturers found another way, so did the fridge manufacturers. It was removed from the hands of the consumer, put into legislation, and the ozone hole is shrinking, and off you go. So definitely, I think it's one of the only ways to really make a big-scale change.
All right.
Sorry, this is the dinosaur row. Asking questions. Nobody on the field seems to be asking any questions. So I have a ruler question. I'm raising Charles. Why do we not design businesses from the beginning? We're living villages. So all these economies, the city, apparel, tourists, are all based on fancy wages. And it's our local companies, apparel industry, chasing our wages and then sacrificing of our population. So I guess a very good question.
Right.
Two would like to ask.
I'm going to leave that question for the afternoon when we talk about society, because we are out of time. We actually about 15 minutes over. So unless there is any other question to any of the others, I'd like to break now. Come outside, have some tea, because we are supposed to be back here at 11:30. So we'll see how fast we can do the tea and try to get back. All right? Please, outside on the lawn. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.